shout out to Expressway 294 East. Shout out to Expressway 55 South. But I'm here, despite the best efforts of Chicago traffic and its drivers. I am here, and what makes this even more special is I'm joined by my favorite Marine. I'm joined by the sergeant himself. How are we doing, Greg? Greg Rector.
Well, I was going to give you a heck for calling me just a sergeant because I was a master gunnery sergeant.
Gunnery sergeant, correct. Yes.
So yeah, the sergeant was just a bit of a demotion on your part, which I don't appreciate.
and first of all, Master Gunnery Sergeant, I apologize. And you earned every one of those, what we used to call idiot stripes. I don't know if they call them that in the Marine Corps, but in the Army we used to call them idiot stripes.
Well, yes, yeah, they're the same. They're the same, absolutely. So, yeah. So, and did you see that story today about what Mayor Daley did to the parking meters in Chicago?
This was not news to me.
The United Arab Emirates.
This was not news to me. I've been following this. This is a 20-something year story. They first began to examine the idea of changing the way that, for those who do not follow the intricacies of Chicago's politics, which are fascinating in and of themselves and deserving of another show, maybe we should do that show someday.
Which are also very highly dirty. Let's just put it that way. They're highly dirty.
Well, politics, like sex, when done right, is usually dirty, Greg. But my point is that for a long time, like most cities, the coffers of the city directly received whatever came from fees associated with people parking, at meters in the city. But in one of those strokes of genius, and of course, it is a stroke of genius, you realize who works for whom, the city ended up leasing or selling outright, I guess, really, their rights to receive revenue from parking in exchange for a lump sum payment, which sounds like a lot of money in the moment. But when you realize that in a handful of years, they could have made that much and more, and they've now sold away these rights for decades.
To the United Arab Emirates.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. But when you realize that that the firm that was one of the firms founded by the Daley brothers, had a hand in brokering the deal, it all makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Which is the reason why I said this was a very dirty business. And again, this will go until 2084.
Correct.
That nobody in Chicago who puts money into a meter is helping the city of Chicago whatsoever. And
Correct.
that's just a total abomination. And but
shout out to my friend Ben Jodorowsky, I think is how his name is pronounced, who first broke the story in the Chicago Reader decades ago.
Yeah.
Before it even had been fully, all the ink had dried. I mean, before everything had been signed, he sort of heard wind of this deal. And yes, it is par for the course. I was looking recently at a wall that had plaques of the governors of the state. Now, our most recent governor has never been indicted, so shout out to him, J.B. Pritzker. But several of the
which is very rare. It's very rare. The politics in Illinois and New Jersey all seem to be very, very similar because every senator gets indicted, the governors get indicted. Yeah. It's just a constant thing, and it doesn't matter which party they're from either.
Right. Because Big Jim Thompson and I think Rauner managed to dodge indictment. He did get cited for something regarding.
He got cited, but didn't get indicted.
Indicted, right, regarding some of those elder care facilities that he owned. But I'm guessing nobody tuned in to hear about the ins and outs of Chicago politics. I'm guessing people tuned in to hear us bloviate, not about that, but instead about, Notre Dame football in specific and then college football in general. So through a variety of events, you came to be a Notre Dame football fan, Greg. With all the thrills, chills, and spills thereunto appertaining. And I am very interested in hearing what you think of this version of the team and the seasons thus far. And then what do you think is going to happen next regarding your sturdy Fighting Irish?
Well, they got Riley Leonard in the transfer portal, and I was pretty pleased when they announced Riley Leonard was going to be their quarterback, because, as I said to you last year in a DM chat, when Riley Leonard was playing last year before he got injured against Notre Dame, I said Riley Leonard would be one of these quarterbacks that I would take in the draft last year. Well, I have to change my tune a little bit on this one right now. Because Riley Leonard just has not played anywhere near the level that he was playing at Duke last year. And then, of course, you've got the 5 injured players now for the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame, which is certainly hindering the progress of the Fighting Irish. And as you have probably seen when I've been on the Last Word with Jeff, Jeff keeps reminding me that Northern Illinois University did beat the Fighting Irish this year, which, yeah, it's painful. It is very painful. Yet again, we have another coach who doesn't have the team ready to roll against teams that don't really matter on their schedule. You would think that, that Northern Illinois was a 28-point underdog, by the way, and they beat us by 2 points. Yeah. So yeah, that's been the frustrating part about the Fighting Irish. Brendan Morrison now being gone for the year really hurts their secondary, but they're going to play Georgia Tech, who are now without Hunter King, the quarterback for that Yellow Jackets squad. So if they need me to fly down to Atlanta and I can become Rudy Rudiger tomorrow to face the Yellow Jackets and get lifted on their shoulders, I'll gladly do that, because without Hunter King, I don't think the Yellow Jackets stand too great of a chance.
Well, first of all, shout out to Thomas Hammock, who I've been following since his days as a player. And he was running back himself, a power back.
Yep.
Squat, compact power back in his own day in DeKalb. But I would like to point out that even without Hayes King, Georgia Tech was going to run the football, and they're going to run the football well.
But the Fighting Irish have Howard Cross the third and Riley Mills, the 2 smaller defensive tackles. They have a good, solid edge player as well, and their linebackers all know how to stop the running game as well. So there's my answer to the running game that Georgia Tech is going to present. Okay. Now, does this apply later in the season when it's the Army or the Navy coming up against Notre Dame? I've already said to Jeff, one of those 2 teams could easily beat the Fighting Irish this year. Easily. And that scares the hell out of me, but again, it could happen.
Well, I would urge Notre Dame's team and Notre Dame's fans not to get complacent, even against a Hayes Kingless Georgia Tech, simply because Georgia Tech plays extremely hard. They are not loaded at any position. They don't.
No.
There's no place we see a bunch of 4 and 5 stars. That's not how their team is built.
No.
But they are a smart, tough team. They are going to give you everything they've got. And at least you knew what Hayes King was, right? You'd had a lot of tape on him going back to Texas A&M. I'll be fascinated to see what they look like. Now, obviously, they're going to trim back the playbook, but I would like to see what they look like without Hayes King, because so much of the
Bryson has played 3 games in the past, so yes. You have a little bit of tape on their new quarterback. Did he impress me in any of those games? Not really. Not really.
I got you.
And again, when the Fighting Irish come after a quarterback, they can get that job done. So if he's going to be dropping back, he better be in the RPO state of mind and getting rid of that ball real quick.
I agree that I think Notre Dame wins, but I see a lot of people predicting an easy win. And
No, not going to be easy, because again, Notre Dame's going down to Atlanta to play them, and that's not an easy place to go and play.
It's not an easy place to play. And I just have a feeling there's going to be a couple of big plays on defense. Notre Dame's going to make some plays also, but Georgia Tech's defense is going to probably come up with a big play or 2. I'm not predicting a pick six, but I also won't be surprised if there's a pick six.
I have one pick six, but it's going to be Mr. Xavier Watts, the safety from Notre Dame, who's going to have that pick six. Because I mean we're basically talking about a rookie quarterback against that defense.
I get it. I get it.
So and Riley Leonard actually went 7 for 10, 105 yards last week using the RPO. Oh my, no. Denbrock actually got them to actually play some modern offense. It was frightening. I was scared.
So you're not fully in love yet with Mike Denbrock as a play caller?
I think Marcus Freeman has held Denbrock back, is what I think.
Huh.
And this is what I've said about Freeman and the losses that they had against Marshall in the past, Northern Illinois this year. I mean, this man just does not trust the offense that is needed to win in college football today, because he is a defensive coach.
Okay. Well, we shall see. I think, like many defensive coaches, he wants to slow games down. I think, like many defensive coaches, he wants to, get 7 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards, 8 yards, 4 yards, 3 yards, and then end every possession with a kick, right? The old maxim about that. I think it's going to be a 30-20 game. I think it stays very close for a long time, and then slowly but surely Notre Dame kind of, ekes out towards the end. It sort of pulls away. It probably stays a one-score game at halftime, and then they sort of pull away a little bit. And then there's probably a cosmetic late score by Georgia Tech to make it look close, make it look very close. It's sort of what I perceive. Yes.
Yeah, I really think that because Georgia Tech's secondary doesn't really impress me either. I really think that Bo Collins, the senior from Clemson, has a very big day for them. It was nice to see Chris Mitchell score a touchdown last week. They really have to be able to pass that football, though, because again, when you've got teams like the Army and the Navy coming at you, you try and ground and pound against those teams, and you're going to lose that game. I don't care. Army and Navy don't have the 3 or 4 star players either, as we both know. But man, are those defenses ever playing very solid football? They are just everywhere. You're muted,
Greg. Yeah, sorry about that. So, Greg, before we move on to talking about the week that will be at large, give me a player that most people maybe aren't aware of. Give me a Notre Dame player who established himself or makes a name for himself in this game that maybe people aren't already familiar with.
I'm gonna say the well, let me go to the defensive side of the football here. I think Leonard Moon is going to be a very important piece now that Brandon Morrison is out for the season. And of course, he is a freshman. Pardon me. He's a senior transfer. But again, Leonard Moore is the freshman. I'm sorry. But again, like when Brendan Morrison came out as a freshman and started putting people on notice as a freshman, Leonard Moore has the skill set required to be a pretty good corner, and he can cover. He can actually cover. His tackling, of course, is not going to be well known at this point because he is just a freshman. But again, Leonard Moore would be the guy that I would point out for fans to watch against Georgia Tech.
Yeah, excellent. And while I think there's more to be said, and maybe we'll revisit some things about this matchup again in the future, there's other games being played outside of down in Atlanta, Georgia Tech facing.
There are
a few. There's a few other games. being played.
Is there really that many college football games in a week? I don't understand.
I've been told, I have sources, Greg, that have told me that they're playing other games, and I have friends in the South who are only dimly aware that Notre Dame is playing a game in the South. I had to remind them that, while you're staring blankly at everything SEC, there are other games being played also. And frankly, I think the Big Ten is fascinating this year. But
the Big Ten the Big Ten is got a much better storyline than the SEC does right now.
Yep.
Because Oregon is unbeaten, Penn State is unbeaten,
Yep.
and the University of Indiana is also unbeaten. And if Indiana can come out and play against Ohio State later on this year, because everybody's talking about Washington and Michigan on their schedule as well. Well, yep. I'm not worried about either one of those two teams for this Hoosiers team. I only worry about Ohio State. And if they come out and beat Ohio State, I'm telling you, it is going to be a nightmare scenario. Right. Because if Penn State also beats Ohio State this year, you've got Oregon, Penn State, and Indiana who would all be unbeaten because they don't play each other. And, oh, Lord, what are you going to do?
Well, all three should make it in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that's not that difficult a choice. To me, that all three of them deserve to be included in the 12 game.
But that would knock out Georgia already. It would knock out LSU, Texas A&M, all those one-loss teams in the SEC would all be gone. And would that not be a joyous occasion to see the SEC teams out of there? Because as I've said to Bill, I've said to Jeff on the last word for the last few weeks, we have very good football teams from the SEC that are now only good football teams.
Right. I have not seen an SEC team so far that I thought was great. I've seen some Big Ten schools I think potentially could be great. And you mentioned Indiana. Is there a better story in all of college football than Indiana? What Coach Cignetti has done, a man who's had success every place he's coached, mostly at smaller schools. But once again, why you have to pay attention to smaller schools, people. But
he was the head coach at James Madison, and he now has the job in Indiana, and he is one of my two top coach of the year candidates. The other, of course, being Matt Barnes from Iowa State.
Yeah, well, both guys are getting it done. I'm even more impressed with how quickly Coach Cignetti has managed to put his stamp on an Indiana team that most people thought would be lucky to be bowl eligible coming into the season.
But he has the Canadian at quarterback. He has the guy from up here.
Yes.
Oh my goodness! And Curtis Rourke is so much bigger and stronger of an arm than his brother is.
He's a better version of Nathan, and Nathan was pretty darn good.
Yeah. And Nathan is now on the sidelines for the BC Lions up in CFL now because he's struggled a little bit at the end of the season here. So Vernon Adams will be in the playoff game for BC this weekend. Just so you know, all my Canadian fans understand what's going on up here.
And shout out to my friends from the OG version of Draft Twitter who loved Vernon Adams, and there were Vernon Adams wars in Draft Twitter back in the day, my friend.
Oh, yes, there were. Yes, I remember them.
Yeah, they were people. I saw friendships tested during the Vernon Adams days on Draft Twitter. But that's, once again, not why people have tuned in. So back to college football. I'm excited by several things going on. Of course, as you mentioned, Oregon right now is taking on the Purdue Boilermakers. I think they will escape unscathed, but the Boilermakers get somebody every year, Greg, no matter how bad.
Yeah, but that was last week. That was last week because they came out against Illinois and only lost by the 1 point in the overtime. How Purdue put up 49 points against Illinois. I mean, how Brent Bielsma is not in a hospital bed already with his heart attack, having his Illini give up that many points is shocking.
Yeah, and frankly, Illinois had every opportunity to lose that game.
Yep.
And probably should have lost it. But looking at you mentioned Indiana. They're going to take on Nebraska. That's going to be a really good game. I will be watching that one.
Yep.
UCLA, which I'm still trying to get used to saying UCLA, but UCLA, Big Ten legendary member, UCLA will be facing Rutgers, another long-term member of the conference, Rutgers. UCLA and Rutgers will now be placing each other in gymnastics, wrestling,
Yeah.
track and field, tennis.
But UCLA is going to lose their 4th straight conference game, and that'll be another record because they already own the record for having the 3rd straight conference losses when they've joined a new conference. So right. UCLA, unfortunately, still has the best looking women go to the games in Los Angeles. It's bar none. They have the best looking women that go to those games. And seriously, but their team is in big trouble in the Big Ten. We got to get rid of that Big Ten name because, of course, it's 16 teams now. I mean, come on.
They're not done. And they're not done, Greg. They're not done.
No.
So eventually they'll have when it gets to 20, they can break it, and it can be Big Ten with the
2.0.
Right,
or the square.
Right, exactly. But not squared. That'd be Big 100. But it's still exponential, right? To the exponent of 2, power of 2. Michigan and Indiana. Michigan and Illinois play now. If you were just to judge from what you just last saw, you would think that Michigan would put 100 points on them. But Michigan offensively is not as frightening as Purdue in a very strange sort of way. They're not as diverse. They're not as interesting. They're not as surprising. They're going to probably just try to run the ball down your throats. And that
because they got Roji out of the lineup now when they put in Tucker, who can throw the football. He can throw that football, which was a bit of a shock. I still don't care. It's still that school up north, as you well know. I despise them. They're out of the playoff picture. That's all that matters. And Brent Bilsma will be in very, very mean spirit towards the Wolverines when they come down to Champaign. It is not going to be a pretty sight.
I think Illinois does bounce back. I'm not quite going to call all the way for the upset, but I think it will be a literal field goal type game. I think it'll be super close. I'll be interested in seeing how that game turns out. BYU, speaking of teams that people kind of slept on, is facing Oklahoma State. I'm fascinated by how that game will play out.
Oh, Mike Gundy loses another game. I'm just so sad by that.
Yes, well,
I'm so sad.
I can hear the tears in your voice. Here's another fascinating game. You just mentioned how Army has that sort of that approach that just grinds teams down. They're going to face East Carolina. That's going to be an interesting game, mostly just to, get to see my Black Knights of the Hudson essentially tell a team what they're going to do, and then they'd be powerless to stop it. That is fascinating, right? When you have the team that's less talented, you dictate to the other team, you tell them, here's what we're going to do to you, and then they can't stop it. Fascinating.
And Navy will do the same thing to Charlotte.
Correct.
The midshipmen, who I support, of course, compared to your little Black Knights or whatever they call themselves. I don't care about that
later in November, but go ahead, continue.
I'm not a West Point guy. I'm an Annapolis man. Even though I can't stomach that white uniform, but especially the Fly Boys and the Tom Cruises and all that garbage. But again, I mean, these guys are all going to be officers. I mean, I was not an officer, so
understood.
That was my whole bottom line with that. But again, Army is going to face East Carolina, and it's just a shame that Siobhan Revelle is gone from that roster for East Carolina. If you guys have not heard about that cornerback, you should go watch his film from last year. And remember, he will be drafted this year, even though he does not participate in the combine or anything. This young man is just a talented corner. He is a very talented corner. As a matter of fact, I had him as my third corner after Morrison and Travis Hunter. And Will Johnson, sorry. I had him ranked above Travis Hunter in my cornerback rankings. So
okay.
Oh yeah.
You buried the lead for a moment there. Okay. Wow. That's the t-shirt. That's the moment I'm going to remember. So I love that. But you're right. He's a terrific player. He will be drafted. He may slide a little bit because of what you mentioned, not being able to work out.
Yeah.
But I still don't think he makes it out of the top 50 to 60 players, unless it turns out there's something very serious. I don't think it's that serious. But
I took him. I took him in one of Bill's, or sorry, Jim Wickens's
yep.
efforts. I took him in my. He was my third pick.
Oh wow.
He was my third pick because I really believe that this young guy can really be an outstanding corner, much like the guy that played at Toledo last year.
Are you talking about Quinyon Mitchell?
Yeah, much like him, because again, it's the quality of the opponents,
Sure.
right?
Right.
But when I'm really upset that he's not going to be able to showcase himself at the Senior Bowl, though. It really is upsetting, because then he would have been, like you said, a guaranteed top 50 pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, and that's what eventually did it for Quinyon, was the ability to go and show everyone at the Senior Bowl that he could hold up against anybody.
Yeah.
A couple of games that are interest to me. I think Missouri is probably going to win by about 13 over Auburn. I think Miami, as long as they have their heads screwed on right, should probably win by 20-ish against Louisville. Virginia and Clemson is
but again, Miami coming off their break,
trash. Yep, a little
they
trash.
suck. Now, if Cristobal has another bad game after a break, that would be a nightmare for Hurricanes fans.
It's a trappish game, yes.
Yeah, because I want the Hurricanes to go and beat Dabo Swinney this year so badly. I cannot stomach Dabo Swinney. I don't like the guy. I never have liked the guy. I think his players become overrated at the NFL level. And his two superstars, Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence, they are 1-5 with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, darn. Yeah.
Well, once again, Greg Rector, always ready for the petty. Now, that brings us to a couple more games I do want to make sure we hit on, and then I will talk a little bit of small school ball. Shout out to my friend Steve Morton, who we had on past. Talk about Tennessee. Tennessee, of course, places Alabama. In other years, this would have been people sort of talking about, can Tennessee deny Alabama a cover? I will not be surprised if Tennessee manages to win this game. Now, it will not be easy, obviously. Even Alabama, which is sort of wounded, or whatever term you want to use, not, the Alabama of a couple of years ago. They don't have the depth they've had in the past. Their defense is good, but not great, and their offense is inconsistent. They don't have a tight end or wide receiver that truly scares you. Their running backs are solid. They'll play in the next level, but they aren't superstars. This feels like if you're going to beat Alabama, this feels like the time to do it. I guess is what I'm saying.
But it's going to be up. It's going to be up to the defensive front four for Tennessee to get to Jalen Milroe, because that secondary is very young for Tennessee, and if they're leaving receivers open for Milroe, they're going to be killed. They will get hammered.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah.
Well, James Pierce, of course, has to play a much better game than we've seen out of him, especially against the Razorbacks. War Pig Suey, which
was certainly heard.
I proudly said on the last word when they beat them. Well, Woo Pig Suey is a major thing. Having lived in Arkansas for as many years as I did.
Yes.
Yes. So yeah, the Woo Pig Suey was definitely loudly said on the last word.
Yes.
But again, Pierce has to be that NFL type of an edge.
He has to have his best game, maybe of his collegiate career. Yes.
Yep. And if he gets to Milroe, without Milroe getting out of that pocket, Alabama's going to have a tough game.
I think Alabama's a tough game, period.
Yep.
The days of them just blowing people out, this is not the year for that. They're even the games where they win going away is still going to be 10, 13, 14, maybe 17 points. They're not going to roll anybody. at this point in the season. I'm interested to see two things. As you said, can they get that interior pressure that collapses and prevents Milroe from flushing, right? Which is the whole point of interior pressure, as opposed to just, running the arc. A guy can maybe spin out or make one person miss, and then he's gone out the gate. Interior pressure, if it's done correctly and smartly with gap integrity, denies the quarterback the opportunity and makes him just sort of keep fading backwards and backwards.
But Alabama has a secret weapon at their center position. Parker's Brailsford, who came from Washington with Kalen DeBoer. He's a smaller center, yes, and he reminds me so much of Mark Stepnoski, not Travis Bloody Kelsey like those other guys were saying on their draft program, because both of them are far too young to remember Mr. Stepnoski. So, okay, I gave them credit for that. But Parker Brailsford, if you watched the game last week, he blew open a hole for Milroe that was just so beautiful when he scored that touchdown. I mean, it was heaven.
Here's what I'll say. He's got a great what I call power to weight ratio, like a sports car, right? He's not a dump truck. He's a sports car position.
he's only weighing in at 265, 270.
Yeah.
So he's not a big guy, right?
Right. He's going to have to try to get at least into the low 290s or upper 280s by the time we get around the combine. But yes, he's truly a great athlete. Moves so well. He hits moving targets. He can get up to the second level. Can hunt down safeties on the move even. I love watching him in the game.
What he does so well is he gets that first step that we've talked about with Tyler Linderbaum a couple seasons ago.
Right.
With the snap and that first step. When you have that combination and Brailsford has it, you can keep those big defensive tackles off your quarterback.
So if I'm understanding you, Greg, it sounds like you're leaning Alabama in this game. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, because Tennessee has the freshman quarterback as well. Right.
Right.
And I just don't see Tennessee unless they get their passing game in order. I don't see them beating Alabama.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to also agree with you, but I think it's a super close game. I think 4 points decides this game.
This could be a 17-13 low scoring game, or it could be 31-27, right? You just don't know what these two offenses are going to be able to put up against the other defense. You just don't know.
Another ranked team in sort of a semi-trap situation is Texas A&M. Now, I've learned to not trust Texas A&M, but this is not the same Texas A&M. I think Coach Elko has probably tightened up the mentality there, but they're facing a frankly not great Mississippi State program. But I would urge them not to, once again, don't come out flat. At this point in the season, this is where you could be somebody's rallying cry if you're not too careful. So,
well, Mississippi State put up 31 points against the Georgia Bulldogs just last week. And that was, to me, that was a shocker that they were able to score 31. Mississippi State is very lowly ranked on their offense in the SEC. But, hey, if they play as well tomorrow against Texas A&M, you don't know if Texas A&M is going to be able to keep up with them offensively.
Yeah, to me, that game's going to be about three things. Can somebody find a big play, even if it's almost I don't want to say accidental, but like one of those things that comes like a tipped ball that's tipped into the hands of a streaking receiver or tipped into the hands of a streaking defender, and somebody gets a sort of unexpected touchdown? Or does somebody get a big play in the special teams, a blocked punt, a big return? And then
that's something that Mississippi State could easily pull off.
Right. So once again, I'm I'm not going to say full on upset alert, but be careful. Be careful. Be a little bit careful out there, A&M. LSU plays, once again, you mentioned Wu Pig Sui. That is a game that is going to be decided within, 6 or 7 feet of the line of scrimmage on either side of the football. If Arkansas's defensive and offensive lines consistently win that battle, Arkansas has a chance to beat the much more talented LSU team. And then conversely,
if Arkansas's offensive line handles the LSU defensive line, which is a smaller group, then Arkansas wins that game. That to me is the bottom line.
Well, then we agree, which makes you feel smart. Okay, so we see that game the same way. Let's keep rolling. I'm going to save one big game towards the very end. So Kansas State leaving that conference. I'll come back. There's one last game in that conference I do want to discuss, but leaving that conference for a moment and going to West Virginia and Kansas State. Now, Kansas State is one of those teams that quietly, every year seems to win 9 games or more with almost, very little fanfare. And they're going to do it again this year, right? They're going to win 9 games or more again this year with very little fanfare. They lost their quarterback, obviously, in the transfer portal. No big deal.
Avery Johnson.
The kid they had previously, young man they had previously. Howard, they lost in the transfer portal.
Right.
Not to say it was not a great loss, but they have someone who is an elite level athlete. I call him vanilla RG3 sometimes, but he is a spectacularly athletic player. His judgment is the only real issue I have. Like, he can make so many wow plays, and every once in a while he'll do a what play. But as long as he doesn't try to make things happen that can't be made to happen, they have a chance to win every single game. How do you see that game playing out, Greg?
Well, since I don't like Pat McAfee or Nick Saban on ESPN College Game Day, I'm with Lee Corso when he says anybody but Purdue. It's anybody but West Virginia. And Kansas State, as I said last week, they would beat the Colorado Buffaloes, and they went out and did it. They lost to BYU on a whole bunch of mistakes that were fixable. The coaching staff absolutely got that group together, and that's why they came out and beat Colorado, and I believe they'll handle West Virginia as well. Oh, you muted yourself.
I used to have a joke going back, obviously, to the previous coaching regime. Well, I guess previous 2 coaching regime or sandwich, because you had 2 administrations of the same coach, and then Ron Prince as sort of the reverse Oreo cookie effect. But Bill Snyder's teams, I used to joke that when you looked up fundamentally sound in the dictionary, there's a picture of Bill Snyder's football teams. They used to be the most fundamentally sound football teams in the country, year in and year out. And they built through Midwestern kids from the Southwest, the 3rd and 4th best kids at Texas high schools, right?
Yeah.
That the Texas schools didn't want, and junior colleges from Kansas and other places, including California and sometimes even other places beyond that. That was their recipe for success for decades. Recruit like crazy from junior colleges, the under-recruited kids from big states like Texas, and then, get the best kids out of Kansas, because they sure as hell weren't going to Kansas in those days. So if they didn't leave the state, they would go to Kansas State, because the funny thing is they have more competition getting the top kids from like the Kansas, Missouri area. North Dakota State used to be a bigger challenge for them to out-recruit them than Kansas for a long time. But shout out to Lance Leipold and turning it around in Kansas, one of the great coaching jobs of the last 25 years. But let's keep going. I agree with you once again. I think West Virginia comes out of the gates fast and makes it interesting early on, and then fades down the stretch. Staying in the Big 12.
Is that game at West Virginia?
I think it is. If I can double check.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's in Blacksburg.
Not Blacksburg, Morgantown.
Morgantown. Sorry.
Yes.
Blacksburg, of course, Virginia Tech. Yeah.
Correct. Home of Enter Sandman. Yes.
Yes.
But speaking of the Big 12, Iowa State, speaking of fundamentally sound, tough, hardworking programs built around kids that other people didn't want. But Iowa State plays UCF. And UCF, it used to grind my gears when people call UCF a small school. It's like, it's the biggest school in the world. What are you talking about? I mean, it's enormous. It's a giant, giant school with like 60,000 undergraduates. What are you people talking about? But I knew what they meant.
Yeah.
But it's inexact language. It's a very large school with actually a lot of resources. It just isn't established historically the same way some other programs are. But what do you think happens in the Iowa State?
Iowa State is going to destroy Gus Malzahn this week. Iowa State is so solid a football team, it isn't funny. The wide receiver for Iowa State, Jaden Harden, has caught touchdown passes in 7 straight games, and he's finally being shown some love on the draft boards. I'm seeing finally. He's very, very good receiver. Dominic Orange is a very solid defensive tackle who may or may not come out in the draft this year as well. But that kid's 6'3", 335, and he has just been a brick wall in the middle of the defensive line for Iowa State. Again, UCF, yes, as you mentioned, it is a very large school. But again, Mr. Malzahn has got to hire an offensive coordinator that understands the passing game. And until he does that, or if he refuses to do so, he should be fired. Because, again, yeah, they've got the one great running back, but you can't win. You can't win in this day and age with just the run game. You just can't.
While I don't want to bring up the name of Kendall Briles, well, I guess I already did. But if you look at the talent pool that they have to draw from and his style of coaching, it actually really fits what they should be doing offensively. If you combine the sort of exotic smash mouth wing T stuff that Malzahn likes to do in the run game, and that gets wedded to the Briles super spread you passing concepts, now you got some stuff because they have size and speed amongst the receiving group. They just don't seem to know how to use them.
But even if you don't see them use the RPO either. And that's, I mean, the RPO is just the simplest, quickest way to get the football out to these receivers and let them go for yards after the catch. And he just doesn't seem to do this.
Yeah, well, I mean, at one point he was seen as being on the cutting edge, right?
Yeah.
Everybody was trying to learn. At one point, everybody was trying to learn at least parts of the Malzahn offense. It shows you how quickly these things change, right? Chip Kelly is now back in vogue, right? After having fallen out, and Malzahn has struggled to find his groove again. The thing about what Malzahn does is actually, at the heart of it's extremely simple. His actual play concepts, the actual things he does are extremely simple. His passing concepts are incredibly simple. And that has now been exposed. And the running game is mostly, once again, sort of wing T concepts with some, sort of magic dust sprinkled on them. Add some, some additional shifts, some additional motions, and then run, essentially buck sweeps. And
if he would actually give their slot receiver some actual carries, that could actually help them. Much like the way, because as you well know, with me being the Cowboys fan that I am, I apologize for this, but when CeeDee Lamb does get the football as a ball carrier, they actually are pretty successful with that. And again, if Malzahn would operate that way, he could find himself with more downfield opportunities after, again, using that slot receiver as a ball carrier, because his offensive line can pull and sweep with anybody. But again, he just doesn't do these things, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, and they have the talent. I mean, we talked about how some team's issue is not having enough guys who are big or strong or fast. Not the problem. UCF has all of that. They have big, strong, fast people. They have a good number of them at every position that you could possibly want. But as I think you pointed out, they're not keeping up with the Joneses or the whoever else's, any of the aboves. Let's keep rolling. So, a couple of the games of interest on the top level of college football. And then we're going to talk about a couple of the levels. Syracuse is playing Pitt, which will be a game that I'm expecting Pittsburgh to gut out, but Syracuse will make it close. Thomas Brown was the right hire. Syracuse is going to be good.
Yeah.
And they're going to be good for a while. Mark my words, bookmark it, make the t-shirt, take pictures, screenshot it, whatever. You heard me say this. They are 2 or fewer years away from being a double-digit win team. If you didn't, I don't know if you didn't hear it someplace else first, you're hearing it here. 2 years. So this is 2024.
But
no later.
The Pitt Panthers this year are the most complete Pitt Panthers I have seen since way back in the 1980s when you know who was their quarterback.
You got to go back to the Jackie Sherrill, and you got to go back a ways. But I'm agreeing with you.
But again, this offense is now not just Kenny Pickett to Jordan Addison and pray. He's got a whole whack of receivers that he uses, and their running back is a solid kid as well. And the defense for the Pitt Panthers has played very solid football as well. So Syracuse, I like Oronde Gadsden the second. Of course, his father played for the Dolphins for years, and this young man is going to be an outstanding tight end in the NFL as well. Which is a hint that I send out to Miami fans already that yes, your team needs a tight end, and you should draft this young man. This is the kid that you guys want. But again, the NFL has their own mindset, as we both know.
Well, the good news is that Gadsden is that modern move around guy. He can block a little bit of Ast, but it's not really his strength. But he's got big hands, long arms. He can run, and
you could put him out in the X. I mean, he can go out to the X, and he can thrive.
He's really just a big wide receiver. Yes,
exactly. Exactly.
I want to spend some time on Boise State UNLV. Shout out to my usual co-host, Brock Nakamura Vieira, who could not be here. But he, of course, is a proud graduate of University of Las Vegas. This could be another program-defining win for UNLV if they're managed to knock off Boise State. Another extremely balanced. We're talking about teams that are really balanced. You just mentioned Pittsburgh. Another team that's just solid at every area is Boise State. They're not flashy they have one of the great running backs, of course, we've ever seen in the latter few years of college football. But as a team, beyond just Ashton Jonty, they have the offensive line is very good. The defensive line is very good. They have receivers that are good. They have tight ends that are good. You mentioned tight ends. Their quarterback situation, which was up in the air when the season first began, is very much solidified.
Oh yeah,
they're well coached. They're well prepared. They're well conditioned. This is a really solid top to bottom football team that I think has an outside shot at the 12-team playoff. They need to, first of all, run the table, right? That's the thing you have to do if you're outside.
They rank as the number one team right now because their strength of schedule is better than Liberty's, right?
Right.
And UNLV, of course, had that loss. Boise State did lose to Oregon, and that's the strength of schedule that I'm talking about. When you lose to an Oregon team that's number 2 in the country and barely lost that game compared to the UNLV defeat by Syracuse. And as I remind Brock on the last word as well, UNLV's gotten to be a whole lot better of a student body as well since he's no longer a student at that school. Oh, hi, Brock. But again, the Running Rebels are not as solid a team as this Boise State club is right now, and with Ashton Genty, um, if that man's name is not called by the Dallas Cowboys in round one, sitting where they are right now, being the 15th pick overall, I'm going to really blow my gasket. As you recall last year during the Draft Central program, how I kept whining about not taking a running back.
I do remember.
Yeah.
That stayed with me, yes. And I remember so confidently thinking to myself when my team was moving up, I think 3 or 4 spots, and I was thinking, oh, Christian Gonzalez is sliding down a little bit. We have a chance to move up to get him. And I was like, oh, here it comes. And oh, well. But here we are. We're not here to rehash or pick old scabs. We're here talking about college football. It's a great week. It's a great week of college football games. And I'm excited about many of them. Yeah. I'm saving one until the very end because it's, the game to end all games, blah, blah, blah. But there are other good games that I want to
we already talked about Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. So
what? Yes, we did. We did have Notre Dame, Georgia Tech.
What other game is more important than a Fighting Irish game on a Saturday? I don't understand this.
Well, as we mentioned, the SEC has been taken down a peg as a whole, but there's a couple of truly interesting games that we're going to be sort of talking our way through in just a moment. I'm also interested to see what happens when we get a chance to sort of strap on and get a face full of SMU and Stanford. Now, admittedly, these are not traditional rivalries by any stretch of the imagination, my friend Greg.
I think have they ever even played? Have they ever played each other?
I think they may have played in a bowl game.
Oh, right. Well, there might have been a bowl game back in the 70s or something. But
I did play in a bowl game. They do not have an established history, though.
No.
And Stanford has not quite found its sea legs. Is that the term I want to use? They've stumbled around a bit.
Well, they certainly got beat up when they went to South Bend last week. They got beaten up.
Yes.
Which, of course, didn't really surprise me because, again, Notre Dame tends to lose when they go out to the farm. And I do believe that SMU is about to visit the farm this weekend. SMU, you better have your helmets strapped on tightly because at the farm, strange things happen to very good teams.
Hard to dispute that. I think SMU will survive. They are the more talented, by far the more talented program. But to quote Greg Rector, strange things happen out on the farm.
Well, I mean, USC and Oregon have both suffered losses out at the farm. The University of Washington years ago would get beaten by Stanford at the farm. So you go out to that facility and you better have your helmet on tight because they come out and hit you.
Yep. At your own risk, right? You go there at your risk.
Yep.
I'm going to touch on some non-FBS, and then we'll come to one last FBS game to sort of wrap it up. So the FCS level of football is a level that there was a lot of sort of hand-wringing about. And people were saying, oh, no, the transfer portal, NIL, is going to empty out all the talent out of the FCS level. And I said to them,
Nonsense.
Like every few years, there's some crisis that's going to kill, some level or another of football. And somehow it never comes to pass, Greg. It never comes to pass.
No.
Montana State is an unstoppable killing machine. South Dakota State's really good. North Dakota State's back to being North Dakota State. That's just Montana and Dakotas by themselves have 4 of the best football programs in FCS, and each one of them could beat 50 or 60 FBS schools including some in the SEC. Some of the ones from the SEC would catch an L against some of those programs I just named.
Mississippi State would be in trouble going to any one of those schools this year.
Yep.
Vanderbilt, of course, would probably play an outstanding game against one of them.
Yeah, right.
Because Vanderbilt has just been a phenomenal story.
It's a heck of a story.
Yeah, but again, the FCS schools again are blindsided by their quote unquote ability to compete when it comes to the NFL. Well, these kids aren't going to the NFL just yet. They're still in college. And if you don't pay attention to them, you're missing out on great football.
Right. Could not have said it better. I'm particularly interested in a handful of games where, some teams are going to sort of decide or help to decide. They're not new to this playoff thing. They've been doing this playoff thing for a while at the FCS level. And so these teams are jockeying for position at this point in the season. And some of them will get a chance to establish a good chance. It's not, you can't decide it quite yet, but Mercer should probably roll Samford. Samford in other years has, been a thorn in Mercer's side. Mike Jacobs has Mercer rolling. I think they might have a clean run through their regular season and be undefeated when they reach the playoffs. But they have only a couple more really tough tests before their season ends. But they are loaded for bear, if you'll pardon the term.
Right.
I think they have a chance to make a clean run. I'll be interested to see also how Montana State negotiates the next couple of weeks. They have now some of the guys they have. You mentioned the CFL. Some of the guys they have on that team are maybe not NFL guys, but they've got some real CFL talent on that team as well.
And the XFL will also see several of these young men.
Right, the UFL I think it is now that they've merged the two, but yes, the UFL.
Yeah,
they're about to face the usually dangerous but not so much this year Portland State Vikings.
Right.
So that's probably going to be a fairly easy victory, and they'll face Eastern Washington after that, and then Sacramento State after that. So they have a chance also at making a clean run through the regular season, but
Eastern Washington has not looked as strong this year either. Because, of course, I get my cable TV from Spokane, and that's
nice.
So Eastern Washington is always shown on the air.
I think the class of the Ivy this year might be Dartmouth, and obviously, once again, they have a shorter season than their FCS programs, and they don't play in the playoffs. So, watch Dartmouth while you can, people, because you won't be able to see them in the playoffs. And I get it; they are, the Ivy is obviously a academics first, second, and always. But I urge you, like I said, to watch Dartmouth when you can get a chance. This might be one of their tougher tests. Now, Central Connecticut is not exactly loaded, but they have a couple of players that will present issues for the Big Green of Dartmouth. They have some speed on the outside.
Yeah.
They have some speed on the outside. And we haven't seen Dartmouth really tested that way yet. This will be their first real chance to show if they can deal with that, and if so, how they'll deal with it. This will all be decided this week. A team that's close to my heart, where my mother got her law degree, and where I saw a lot of football games when I was a youngster, to include getting to see Sean McDermott and young Mike Tomlin in their playing days, amongst others. William & Mary is having a very good season. They are a school that is really academics first, too. I mean, they're not exactly an Ivy League school, but they are academics first, second, and always. They have an acceptance rate of a little under out of every three, they accept slightly less than one. So competitive admission.
It is not an easy school to get into.
It is not. It is definitely not. And like I said, they're academics first, but they've had some good players, and they have some good players this year. and I've been bothering my friend. Shout out to our friend at Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl. I bothered him about a couple of guys there. They're facing Campbell's Fighting Camels. They should be able to negotiate that game. Then they have a slightly more stern test against Stony Brook, and then I'll be fascinated by their next game after that, which is on November 2nd. They're going to face NCA&T, a team that they hadn't scheduled for many, many years, despite the fact that NCA&T had wanted to play them. So finally, they've now begun to play a home and home against each other, which I think is great. But when I was growing up, it didn't happen. You know, I grew up in Virginia and wanted to see. I mean, Norfolk State would occasionally play them, and Hampton would occasionally play them, but they didn't play a lot of the other HBCUs. So I'm glad they're playing NCA&T. They are currently 4-2. They have a chance to end up, I think, with only those 2 losses, some of whom came in those money games in the beginning of the season. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm going to tell you another team that fascinates me this year, Greg, and that's Rhode Island. Yep.
Rhode Island has some very, very good football players, and if the Alouettes and the Red Blacks and the Argonauts and the Tiger Cats are paying any attention, yes, Rhode Island has some players for you guys.
They do. They have a couple of guys I think can play down here, but I'm agreeing with you. And they're facing one of their tougher tests this week when they face New Hampshire's Wildcats.
New Hampshire, yeah.
Yep, they have New Hampshire this week. Then this is the meat of the schedule for them, right? Then they have Maine and they have Monmouth. Shout out to my friend Greg Lloyd. Greg Lloyd. I'm sorry, not Greg Lloyd. I wish Greg Lloyd. No offense, Jeff Lloyd, who was a wide receiver at Monmouth, and they have a quite little wide receiver lineage there.
Yes,
but this is going to be a very big game for Rhode Island. I think this is the game where I'll sort of begin to get a really good read of how good they are or not. They're going to be tested thoroughly. I think that, once again, as often happens, explosive plays, turnovers, and unforced errors. The team that has the fewest unforced errors can generate turnovers while avoiding them, and of course, doesn't give up explosive plays. That's the team that's going to come out with a victory.
I've got Rhode Island winning by 10.
They should.
Yeah.
But New Hampshire is just exactly the kind of team that's going to make them play.
That could be a bit of a trap. It could be a trap game.
Right. And
but New Hampshire needs everything to go their way. That's going to be the key.
Rhode Island's currently number 2 in the CAA in the Colonial Athletic, and the Colonial Athletic might get 2 teams in the playoffs, but they're not guaranteed it. So they need to negotiate the rest of this very well. And I'm going to hit on one more team that I'm particularly fascinated by, and that's Tarleton State. I really like that team. I really like that team a lot. I like their coaching. I hope they extend their head coach. I would just urge you to extend him now while you can. He's going to be schools at the FBS level who are struggling in the state of Texas are going to know how to reach his agent. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, Texas Tech, Houston.
Anybody who feels like they're not getting it done, they're gonna know how to reach him. They blew out Utah Tech at the beginning of the year, or not beginning of the year, but just recently. But they had a nail biter with the Southern Utah Skyhawks, who are themselves a fascinating team. They came up another nail biter versus Southeast Louisiana. They had a more solid victory over North Alabama earlier in the season. Yep. And they have a couple of games that I think sort of are games you would circle. They'll have to face Austin Peay on the 26th. And then they have Eastern Kentucky, which will be, I think, sort of another good measuring stick game, I think is the term I would use as well.
There's a school that never gets any coverage, Eastern Kentucky. They never get any coverage. Western Kentucky, the Hilltoppers always get covered, But Eastern Kentucky, well, what? Where's that?
But they put guys in the league, nonetheless.
Yep.
There's always a couple of guys from EKU in the league. I'm interested by that team. Before we finish up with the game we have not yet talked about at the FBS level, do you have any other sort of FCS games of the week or teams of the week that you want to touch on before we hop back up to the big school level?
I just want to go back to North Dakota State.
Oh, sure.
Because that school deserved to beat Colorado in that opening game. They deserved to beat Colorado that week.
Correct. Yeah.
And I don't care what anybody says. Their quarterback can handle against any school that you want to put them up against. And yeah, I just love the North Dakota State University. They just play such sound football.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't have to bother Jim Nagy about that quarterback.
Mr.
Cam Miller is very much on their radar.
Yeah, and if he doesn't go there, he will be at the East-West Shrine game easily.
Yeah. I don't think he's going to end up at the East-West Shrine game. I don't think they'll have the opportunity. But I think the way they usually have 6 quarterbacks there.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing there's usually at least a couple of guys who just politely decline.
Yeah.
So
Miller should be in Mobile. He should be there.
Yeah, Cam Ward will get an invitation. We'll see if he accepts or not. We'll see. I don't think Quinn Ewers is going.
Quinn Ewers likely doesn't go.
He likely doesn't go.
Garrett Nussmeier.
He might. I think he might go.
Yeah.
So that still puts us at basically 2 if we're counting, even if we count Miller. Cam Ward, I guess. So that puts us at 2. Let's see who else.
Does Shedeur actually show up? Do you think he shows up?
I would be shocked if Shedeur goes. I'd be thrilled if he goes, but I'll be shocked if he goes. I have a feeling he's going to be one of those guys that goes straight to combine prep as soon as the season's over.
Well, the young man needs to get away from daddy and daddy's attitude and understand you do not throw your teammates under the bus, son, because you try that trick at the NFL and you're going to be a dead man.
Yeah, it doesn't go well, right?
No.
So Shedeur is not someone I think is going to go. We'll see if a guy like Fafita goes.
Fafita could be a guy that goes.
I think Fafita could go. Who else? Who else would actually go? And Jackson Dart, maybe. He's a maybe.
He would need a solid Senior Bowl.
Yes. So I think Jackson Dart probably says yes. So that gives us to Dart,
5.
Ward. Yeah. So is there another person who needs to go and would go?
Riley Leonard.
Oh, there we go. And Cam Miller. Boom, we did
it. Riley Leonard needs to show that he can throw the football. And, well, the Senior Bowl would be a pretty good chance for him to prove that he can actually throw a football.
I don't disagree. One teeny tiny iota. So I've been checking. My sources tell me there actually is one more game we probably should discuss. And so I guess
really?
That's what my sources tell me, Greg.
Okay. It might be this one here, Bill. It might be this one.
It might be that one. You're right.
Okay. All right.
It might be that one. So this is a sort of day of reckoning, right? Texas has been super impressive to this point. But we also haven't really had a real gut check by a stretch of the imagination to this point either. This is that game, right? This is that game. Oklahoma, sadly, was not in a position to test them at all. That game was shockingly uncompetitive.
Well, no, the first quarter was very bad football because Quinn Ewers is coming back from his injury and he just did not look good at all.
Right.
And then once he got his legs under him, this game was over over because Oklahoma, of course, was missing their top 5 wide receivers. And when you're going against Texas and that defense with your 6th, 7th, and 8th wide receiver on your list, you're in trouble. And they were seriously in trouble. So that's the bottom line with that.
Yeah, the game we did, the show we did, right prior to that game, my friend Nolan J. Lake, who came on and talked about it, said they were moving some guys from defense, who'd played high school wide receiver. They get moved back over. Like, okay, hands up, who played wide receiver in high school. So admittedly, it was not an ideal situation, but I thought the game just on like pure emotion would be a little closer, a little longer than it was. But
no.
I proved wrong.
Yeah, Brett Venables is a fine football coach, but he doesn't have the talent that he needs to be successful at Oklahoma currently. He just doesn't have it.
Not yet. So I've watched Georgia, and Georgia's a good football team. Some would even say a very good football team, but they're not last year's and they're not year before last Georgia. This is not the same team by any stretch. Their offensive line does not impress me as much as the ones of the year and the year before that did. They have a very stout, very good defense, but there's not a superstar. There's good players, guys who will start in the NFL, but there's not a guy that makes you go, right? No one.
Well, they do have the safety who is going to be. Yes, Jeff Barnes, listen to me this year. When you do your mock draft this year, you could put in Malachi Starks from Georgia as a safety, not like the 3 guys you had last year on your list. But again, Malachi Starks will be a first-round pick.
Yeah, I agree. He is a first-round pick. And he's going to be a very good player in the NFL. But still, I don't feel – when I say superstar, like I'm talking about players that you might not see for a couple of years, right? A player this good, he's a very good football player, but I think they'll see another safety that good or better again next year and the year after that. They don't have a player where I look and go, oh, I don't think I'll see another guy that good for a while.
Their linebackers are weaker.
Yep.
And the defensive front is overall much weaker as well. He doesn't have the same rotational type of guys that he's always had there. When you could throw out the Philadelphia Eagles players that they've got. He doesn't have that type of defense any longer.
Right. Bingo. That's what I'm saying. They don't have that guy. The guy where you just look at him and think, oh my God. Oh my God. Right, that guy, the oh my God guy, they don't have right now. They have good players, but not an oh my God guy.
Which is what I said earlier. Football teams that were very good before are now simply good.
Yep. So take me through how you view this game, this Texas-Georgia game, Greg.
I think Kelvin Banks and Cameron Mitchell, who is finally being recognized as well on the draft boards. Thank you, you clowns who were not talking about Cameron Mitchell at tackle earlier in the year. They are going to dominate the Georgia defensive line. Now, Georgia's interior DTs, had they had, the guys that they've got in Philadelphia now, that would be a different ball game because they could put pressure on Quinn Ewers, but I don't see it happening either. I think Quinn Ewers finds Isaiah Bond wide open, and Texas should be able to beat the Georgia Bulldogs. Jalen Milroe is a fine quarterback at Alabama, but Carson Beck, how everybody had this guy going in the first round was beyond me. He is only a good quarterback. He is not a first-round quarterback, in my opinion.
Well, the retort to that is Daniel Jones went in the first round, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
he is.
But again, I mean, these decisions that the NFL teams make are utterly beyond my comprehension and yours. Because I mean, Zach Wilson went to the Jets. Come on.
Right. And somewhere, young Christian Ponder, well, not so young now, I guess, but Christian Ponder is going to catch a stray too at this point. But
Yep.
there are certain quarterbacks that if the right people start to talk about them, things begin to happen. If Carson Beck was at NC State instead of Georgia, he would be rightly viewed as about a third to maybe mid to late second round prospect.
But which is where I have him. Geez, I don't know why.
I know why. But if he goes to the combine and wows people with his answers on the board and tests well and measures well, he'll find his way into the first round, Greg. Whether you like it or I like it or not.
I did a first round draft the other day that I posted at Team MBS, and I only have 2 quarterbacks going in the first round. Cam Ward and the Giants, of course, they get Shedeur Sanders. That's it. Those are the only 2 quarterbacks I see going in round 1.
In the first. Interesting.
2 quarterbacks. Cam Ward.
Okay. I'm not the world's biggest Quinn Ewers fan, but I don't think there's a way he makes it out of the first round. As quarterback thirsty as some NFL teams are,
I don't see the teams that everybody's saying that are quarterback thirsty. I don't see the need for them to go after these guys in round 1, though. I just don't see it.
I hear what you're saying, but
these quarterbacks they level up at the end of the second round, and then day 3 should be loaded with them. But again, this is the NFL that we're talking about, and these guys are so stupid. They are so dumb because they all want that extra year of contract eligibility.
Correct.
And right, I mean, it's just insanity.
Well, right. So the Raiders, the Jets.
I think the Jets could hold on with Tyrod Taylor. He's under the same contract as Aaron Rodgers is.
Oh, I love Tyrod, right? I've loved Tyrod since he was in high school. I don't think NFL teams see him the way I see him, but I think
they should. And then the Jets can draft a quarterback in round 2 or round 3 because guess what? Their offensive line still absolutely sucks this year. And the offensive tackles that are available are not as deep as they were last year. As you and I well know, how many? Where? Holy mother of Lord it was offensive tackle central last year.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing for those that love offensive line play because so many talented tackles went off the board. NFL teams talk themselves in the quarterback every year, Greg. I don't think next year is going to be the one year that they don't do it. We almost had a clean run the Kenny Pickett year, right? Everybody got the memo, but my Steelers, that there were no first-round quarterbacks that year. And I guess
how did that work out for your Steelers? But how did that work out?
It worked out great, didn't it, Greg?
Yeah.
It worked out fantastic because now we have 2 quarterbacks that we like better than that guy, in Justin Fields and Russell Carrington Wilson. But I agree with you but it happens every year. Quarterbacks get pushed up the board. We almost had one year where people, like I said, didn't do it, except the Steelers. But even that year, when there was no first-round quarterback, somebody took a quarterback in the first round. I don't believe next year is going to be that year where nobody takes the first-round quarterback or only 2. Another guy will get pushed into at least one other guy, maybe more.
I don't see Quinn Ewers being that guy because his passing, his deep passes have been so ineffective for the guy that he's not a first-round pick.
I don't disagree with you, but I'll be taking a wait and see attitude. I think somebody talks themselves into him.
Do you know who I think could be a late first-round pick? Is Nussmeier from LSU. He could. And that would be the only other guy that I would take a shot with in this group of quarterbacks in round 1. Because the only round 1 quarterback I have ranked right now is Cam Ward. He's the only one.
So I'm going to throw out another team, and it's going to be horrifying to say, but I won't be shocked. I won't be shocked at all if the Carolina Panthers take another quarterback in the first round. I won't be shocked one bit. I'm not saying they should. I'm saying it won't surprise me. I will not be that surprised, Rick, if it happens.
Well, I currently have the Raiders taking Cam Ward and the Giants taking Shadur Sanders. So, and they're picking 11th and 12th.
Right. And you think the Jets
currently.
You think the Jets are going to stand pat? Once again, I'm not disagreeing with that they should. I just don't think that they will. Teams have a tendency, both because of what you said about the extra year of control, and because they get antsy about the quarterback position for reasons I'm not always sure of. But teams just panic sometimes and just take quarterbacks when they don't need to. But before we wrap this up and everyone goes home, do you have a score prediction for Georgia, Texas?
I think the fans down in Austin are going to celebrate after they put up. I'll say 31-23 over Georgia.
That sounds about right to me. I'll go just slightly lower. I'll go 30-23. So we're both very close together, but I think it's about right. I think it's about a 50 to 55 point kind of affair between the, added together over and under. I think that place kicking will end up being important. People make jokes about college kickers and things like that, but teams with really good and really reliable place kickers can do things strategically that teams that can't always count on their place kickers can't do. So I know it's boring to talk about for some people. Watch out for special teams to be a deciding factor also in that game. But I too also think Texas prevails. Before we go, do you have anything else you want to say? Any plugs you want to get out there before we close out, Greg?
I'm hosting The Last Word tomorrow night with at the other G Lopez. George Lopez and I will be doing The Last Word tomorrow because Jeff is going to be at a game. So George Lopez and I are going to be doing The Last Word tomorrow. And we'll be covering, of course, the results of the things that we talked about tonight. We will basically know a lot more tomorrow about the college football playoff future, I think.
Yes.
If Georgia takes another loss, they're done. They're done. And again, if Alabama loses to Tennessee, Alabama's gone too. These two, you're not going to get these two lost teams in there, kids. All you SEC fans out there, I'm sorry, but when your team has 2 losses, there's going to be enough teams out there with just 1 loss and unbeaten still that you guys are going to be gone.
I agree. I think that unless a bunch of teams drop at least 1 game, for them to get in with 2 losses, one is they'll have to be at least amongst the top 3 SEC schools, which is not guaranteed at all. They need Texas to lose. Well, first of all, Georgia needs Texas to lose this week to them. And then they need Texas to lose again somewhere to somebody else.
Against Alabama again.
Right. There you go. That would help them as well. They'll suddenly have to root for Alabama for probably the first time in their lives when that game rolls around. They'll need for there to only be maybe 1 power whatever undefeated. And they don't care that much about the group of 5 teams or group of whatever teams going undefeated. 1 or 2 of them will make it. And then it gets challenging with the Big Ten, because if Big Ten does have 3 teams in, even if none of the other SEC schools are undefeated, it could get challenging for them. They need the Big 12 to cannibalize itself too. They can't have anybody with, maybe only one loss team coming out of the Big 12 would help them. They need for there to be no undefeated ACC schools. But yeah, a lot has to happen.
Exactly. And I don't see anybody taking out Iowa State in the Big 12 this year. I don't see anybody.
Yeah, well, that's once again remains to be seen. But I agree that they need that to happen. They need some of those teams in places like the Big 12 and others to pick up a loss. Once again, everyone, Greg, tell people they can find your work and follow you, sir.
I'm at teammbsmedia.com. I'm at Greg Cowboys on X, aka Twitter, as I still prefer to call it. And that's where folks find me.
Once again, I thank you so much for joining me. I will be joined next week, back by my usual co-host, Greg Nakamura Vieira, and probably also a special guest that I'm.
That's Brock. Brock, not Greg. Brock. You said Greg Nakamura.
Did I?
Yeah.
I combined the two of you like Brundlefly from the.
No. Horrible. By the way, you can have Brock do his 25 push-ups that he owes me because he called me that 3-letter word earlier today.
Did he?
He called me a sir. What?
Oh, he does owe you 25 push-ups. Then I will make sure. I'll count him out.
25.
And I'll make sure he locks out on top. I'll make sure his nose touches on the bottom. They'll be proper.
Exactly right.
Once again, everybody, first of all, enjoy a great slate of college games. And,
watch George and I at 10:30 Eastern tomorrow night.
You know what? I may have to watch you guys live. I mean, you know what? I think I will. I will join. I will watch. I will comment, I think, as well.
Well, yeah. Watch the Brothers in Anger do their thing.
Yes, I'll watch the Brothers in Anger do their thing. I love that. Is that an official title? Are there T-shirts?
No, there's no merchandise as of yet, but George and I actually do need to create that just to send to Monty, of course, because that's where the whole Brothers in Anger issue came from, was dealing with Monty.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
Well, and that will do it. So once again, everybody, I thank you so much for your attention, your talent, and your time. We will do this again in a week. Be good to yourselves.